Hey, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I'm the streamer here, and tonight we're going to be ripping some stuff out of deployment. So if that sounds interesting to you, we got something fun to do. It's a culmination of quite a bit of work I've been working on to make my deployments simpler and push a lot of stuff off to continuous integration. So that's what the focus will be this evening. If you want to follow me or like what you see, give me a follow on Twitch or hit like on YouTube later when the recording's out, and I appreciate that. I also have a Patreon if you are really interested and want to support me in that way. I'm thankful for the patrons I've got. Thanks to Patrick and Mark for their support of what I'm doing here. And a couple dollars in my pocket is a nice token of appreciation. So I appreciate what you're doing. Let's dig into where we're at today. So if you followed along last week, we were working on getting static assets from CI, continuous integration, and putting them onto the site. And there was a problem along the way with permissions and stuff. So we have to do one little bit of permission work before we can call this bit done, and then we get to start doing all the fun stuff of ripping out the unnecessary pieces. That's going to include taking out Node.js, taking out asset building, and all sorts of parts along the way. So that'll be the exciting part of what we're doing, or it's exciting to a lot of developers to rip out code. So that's the plan. So what I've shared is a link to the issue if you're interested, and you can ask me anything. If I could type, get going, anything about Python or Django. So let's look at stuff. I had to reboot my machine, so we'll need to get the staging server started again, which is a virtual machine in my project. And then we can also, oops, wrong command. Also look at the particular things that we needed to do. And okay. So we need to go to our, I do all my stuff in Ansible. So there's a bunch of Ansible tasks that are in here that are doing all the work of doing deployment. And this is where we need to finish things off before we can start deleting other bits. So what we want to do is ensure, I think it's down towards the bottom. Yeah, we need to ensure that the permissions on some of this stuff are correct. And we're using an Ansible task right now for one of them, but I was realizing that there's a problem with this approach. And I think I might have mentioned it at the end of the last stream. But if you look at this, the way this is set is this command is going to recursively go through and set the entire contents of the static area to a 644 setting. That's fine for individual files. In fact, it's a good thing because it means that the web server, Nginx, will be able to read the files and serve them appropriately. But there is a problem, I think, with this approach, and I think it has to do with the directories. So if you want to actually change into a directory, you need to have the executable bit set. And without that executable bit, you don't have access. So I want to actually confirm a couple things in this process. That first of all, I want to confirm that it matters, because sometimes I get a little fuzzy myself on file permissions in Unix and Linux, and so I'm not actually sure if changing the ownership even matters all that much, because the parent directory of what's considered static root is going to be owned by the www data user. And because that user will own that parent directory, I don't recall if the children directories, even if they're created by root, are going to be a problem or not. I can't remember if the permissions kind of propagate up, or if it'll just say, no, you can't actually view that. So I think one way we can test this is now that the staging site is running, if we actually go over there and look at the files, I believe they still have the 644 settings from last week. I'm pretty sure I ran this. And if that's the case, then we can check if Nginx has a problem with that. If not, we can just punt on the whole thing. I think it is going to be problematic, but we'll see. So these files are located in var dub, and what I called static root in my configuration is this conductor directory. And if we go navigate in there and look at all this stuff, what do we see? So we see exactly what I thought we would see. Everything, including the directories, have permission 6. That's what, read, write, no execute. That's permission bit 6. 4, read. So you can think of this is a binary number of 1, 0, 0, and so that's what makes it a 4. So these are all 644, even the directories. And that's where we need to see if some of this stuff is going to cause a problem. This will be most obvious when we check the staging site if none of the images load. Because if they don't load, that means that the Nginx can't actually get into this directory and see the contents of that stuff. And we should also make sure that it's not cached along the way so that that's not causing other issues. So conductor test, I believe, is the you know what, I'm pretty sure Firefox has it. Yeah. Ooh, internal server error. Fun times. What a good start. All right, let's see what we can see. We've got extra windows open that I don't need. I don't actually need Chrome, and it's blocking my ability to see the chat, so let's close that. So what happened? We can look at var log. Wow, I really am not typing well today. And look at the conductor log and figure out what's going on. Okay, so I think this problem's already, yep. This is in fact, this is the exact bug that I saw the other night. So I know for a fact from previous streams that this images Twitter is the very first file that that the root page of the site tries to reach, and due to the fact that we are getting this error message, it's telling me that the permissions is already wrong. So that kind of confirms that. So we can change the permissions. So we have this one task that actually does a recursive change. There's a problem with this Ansible task though, and that problem is that it only works on all of the files. I don't think you can specify the file type. So let's confirm that. I don't want to misspeak totally in case I didn't read everything properly. But let's go to Ansible file and see if you can specify type, because if you can, that's exactly what we want. We want to specify that the type that goes with the recursive change is just for directories. That would be important. So there's attributes, but that's something else. There's the mode, that's what we're already setting. Owner and path. The recursive options only available for the directory, that's okay. And we're already setting this to directory, that's correct. All right, so I'm pretty convinced now that, like, looking at all those options, that there's no real way to change just the directories from Ansible, at least. So we're gonna have to get a little more clever with this. So let's make a new task. And so we're gonna do this. The way this is gonna work is in like 2 phases. So the Ansible one's gonna run, that will run 644 and everything. And then we're going to change, let's see, we're going to make the data directory change after that, because you got to do it in two sweeps, I guess. And I could either do this one of 2 ways. I could make it so that everything is 755, there's some value to that, perhaps. Let me think through this. So I'll spell out the two options, and then we can talk through the benefits of one or the other. So if we have to change the assets that are coming out of this tarball, which is where all the static files are getting stored in static root. The problem that we found last week is that the permissions on those files are just wrong. They are for like the user account from the Circle CI user that was created, so they're just totally wrong. So we have to change them using the under the covers. I'm sure this is using the change owner command, which is ch. I'll type it over here if you've not used it before, but it's that's how you change ownership, and it changes the group or the user of a directory or a file. And so we can do this in two passes to get this correct. We can either say change all of the files to be 755, which would include the individual file non-directory types, the actual files, which that gives them an executable bit for a little bit, which is kind of it's a little strange. Like why would they need the ability to execute? The advantage of going that way is that Nginx can always see the content of the directories, which is actually kind of making me lean that direction. So even though it like is a little bit looser on controlling the file's executable bit, we will immediately after that crank it down so that the files will not have that bit. So it just means that that Nginx itself will never not be able to see the contents of the directories. So that's good. That's a good thing. So let's go that approach. So the first, oops, I'm doing chat stuff over there. So the first thing that we want to do is change this mode to be 755, and then we can say ensure www data owned files are not executable. And in order to do that, we're going to need to be the root user. That's what become is. We're not going to use a file though. We're going to say shell. And this is where we'll use a chown command. And I'll save the bits of that for a minute. I don't actually know off the top of my head what's going to be the right thing, because we might actually even need to do like a pipe operation or something. So what args do we need? We need to say that we're going to change directory to the, where do we need to do this from? We want to do this from the directory above static root, which is going to be var www. And I don't know if we need a warn option. I'm looking at the command up here that we ran last week. So now's where we need to figure out what to pass to chown. So I saw something on Stack Overflow that was helpful, so let's search for that. So chown files only is or kind of what we want to do. And I think it was using a find command with a type parameter, if I recall correctly. Yeah. So in fact, this looks like it. And we'll change that and do this. So it's a single find command. So let's break this down. Find command says, and that's going to be wrong. In fact, since it's a find command, we don't need to have a change directory. We want to do this on static root, which is where all the static files are. Okay, now we can talk through all these parts. So find is going to start from static root, which, as a reminder, is var www conductor is the path, and it's using the type flag to say, and the type is file. So that's looking, it's going to ignore everything that's on a file. So that will exclude directories, which is what we want. And then when using the exec flag, so exec is an option that you can pass to find to execute another command on the files that would return. And so we're going to use, we already have it, the owner and group are already right. So actually this is even better. So this is change. So chmod is change mode, I think is that what they're gonna say? I do the man page on that, chmod. Yeah, so that's change mode, and it's changes the executable bits of files. And not just executables, changes, that's too specific, changes the permission bits of files. So that's what chmod is for. So back to our task, we're going to say chmod, and it's already 755, so we're going to change it to 644, which kind of locks down those permissions. Honestly, I don't know, I'm kind of stealing this from Stack Overflow, so I don't know the specifics of what this does, what all of these parts do, but I suspect that the dash says take other, these are the arguments that you're going to pass into chmod. And that might not be totally true, but this at the very least is a placeholder. Oh, there we go. And even tell if we can read more down here. Thank you, Stack Overflow. So the plus sign is expanded. Okay, cool. So if you want to read more, look up this Stack Overflow question, which has chown files only was my Google search. So I think that might be everything that we need to try this out. And so what I want to do from here is actually try to do a deployment. So let's make sure that Ansible is available by working on our conductor virtual environment. And then I'm going to run Vagrant Provision, which is going to call Ansible on a virtual machine. And this takes a minute because it's got to run through all of the plays for the whole deploy, but it's not a super long process. And we should be able to get a result pretty quickly because the web portion is fairly early on. Quite a bit of this will go away as we start to delete stuff, like these node things. Like it looks like it's trying to check if it needs to install Node, which is taking time. So that's what we're going for, is deleting all of those extra parts. And it's cruising right along. Like this step's going to go away. That's taking time right now because that's installing JavaScript dependencies. And this is building JavaScript dependencies. This is all stuff that we moved up to continuous integration. Okay, it says it ran both of them. So let's go back to where those files are, var www. And so we can see already that this conductor area is 755. That's what we want. And if we list, all of them, then we also see that the directories are 755 and the files are 644. Cool. Okay. So let's try refreshing the site. There it is. Okay. No more permission errors. Awesome. I did want to talk about another alternative to this that I had considered and may still do, and then discuss the trade-offs. So there is a possibility of serving static files directly from the Python app. And a way to do that is with a tool called white noise. Well, come on. And the name, if you're curious, it's something that serves static files, and white noise is often considered static. So there's the cute name tie-in. But white noise is specifically for Django. Is that true? Maybe it's not. Let me not misspeak. I know it's most often used with Django, which you can see there, but it looks like it can also be used with Flask and other Whiskey stuff. So it's broader than I thought. But what it can do is you can have your static files built into your Python application, and white noise simulates a lot of the stuff that you might use Nginx for. It would put in like long-running cache headers. It will make sure it provides the proper content types and fancier encryption methods like Brotli, and still does other stuff like gzip too. So that's pretty cool. And the nice part about white noise is then you don't have to do static file setup in Nginx and deal with all of that and the static asset stuff that I've already been doing. So what's the trade-off? The trade-off that I've seen so far is the way that I'm packaging up the Python application is that if Python is the thing serving all the static files, there's technically a small window of time where if I made a request with an old version of the app and that request returns the HTML with a bunch of paths that have hashed file names, as we've discussed from previous streams. In the current mode with Nginx, all of those files, those static files with their different hash IDs, are dumped into the same place. So new, old, doesn't matter, it's still all there. If we switch to a mode where all of these things were served from the Python app and using white noise, then the problem is that in that transition, there would be a possibility that a request served with the old app that gave out a certain set of hashes would then have subsequent requests for the images or static assets come to the new app. And the new app is not going to have both the old and the new static files. So it actually would 404 on that, which is going to be a problem. So I guess it's a question of how tolerant of you are on downtime and 404s. People could, in theory, do a refresh, but it's not 100% seamless process. Now, before I get super critical, I guess, it's, yeah, so this Nginx mode doesn't suffer from that same problem as far as I can tell, because I might be like loosening the permissions to be 755 for a moment, but Nginx never has a problem of I can't access this file or this file doesn't exist. As you can see here, like all of the versions would exist in the static files area. So yeah, that's the trade-off. There is a way around it, like if you were to use a CDN, a content delivery network, so that your files are actually cached out to Amazon's CDN or any other. There's a bunch of CDNs. So the idea of a content delivery network is to bring the static files closer geographically to a different user. So if they're making a request of my site, which is in a data center in New York, I think, and somebody was making a request from, say, Japan, then the time that it would take to get that static asset, has to go literally around the world. Even though the speed of light is fast, that still takes time. So if you have a content delivery network, then that file would be copied over to some servers that exist closer to Japan in the example, and by having your content delivery network be the buffer between you and the web server, it's possible that it would act as like the dumping ground, like I've got here with Nginx. So it would be able to serve both versions because the CDN would have them cached. So that's a possibility if you're worried about static files and doing deployments and the cutover and what happens to people's files as if you're serving them from white noise. There's a really good solution to that. But that's not the solution I'm going for today, and I think that's about as far as we need to take that. So what do we have now? We've got the new command that changes the permissions, and we've got the thing that also locks down the permissions on the files to 644. Cool. Which I think, so we did check that. We confirmed that it does need it. We checked on the site. Okay, I did have this one extra test to confirm the behavior of the deploy, and this is something that I think is a smart thing to do when you do work on deployment stuff like Ansible, is to try it in basically a fresh environment. We've been testing it in an environment that has data already, which is a good test too. But I want to do another test where it's like, if I needed to restart a server from scratch, would it still work? So let's do that, run that experiment now. So what I'm going to do is, in my virtual machine, I'm going to destroy the entire contents of the conductor directory. Okay, and now frankly, I expect the server over here to probably blow up. It's going to say, oops, I can't find anything. And that's bad news. And you can see it's not finding images, it's not finding CSS. So this is what the website, the homepage looks like if it was totally unstyled. So let's try now to do another Vagrant Provision command and let it copy all of those files to the static area. It will hopefully create the directory, give it the right, extract the files into that directory, give it the right permissions, and then we'll be really good to go. So while that's building, let's take a look at the tasks and other issues that are here. So we are currently working on this one where we're getting rid of static assets, or getting static assets from CI. We're almost done with that. We're running that final test, which will close that out. After that's done, we'll be able to do this step right here of removing NPM. NPM is what's doing all of the building on the server right now, and it's just not needed. It's all done in Circle CI. So that'll be that bit, which will speed up deployments quite a bit. And then we will be able to move on to some of the other things. Although, you know, now that I'm looking at this list, I noticed something that I forgot to do the other day. We did not make the Shiv app work with Celery. So make Shiv work with Celery. And so if we look at, well, let's finish this off and I'll complete the thought later. So now we've got the conductor directory is back, and let's look at the contents. It looks like those are back, and you can see it's cleared out the other extra files. There's only one app file in here now. That's good news. So we should be able to come back over here, hit refresh, and everything is good. Great. So let's commit that. And we'll say fix file permissions of static assets. And this fixes number 375. And if you haven't used GitHub a lot, fixes was something that GitHub will notice and read. And so when I push this up, it will actually automatically close the issue that we were working on. You can come back over here, and you can see it's now marked as closed. And it tells you when it was closed in that particular commit. And just to finish it off, because I like completing a checklist, we've got that all done. Okay, so let's go back to talking about Celery. What's going on with Celery? In the tasks, we have a worker role, and there's a template in here. And this is using supervisor D. And there's a problem with this thing in that it is relying on the virtual environment that is not going to be there when we're all done. So ultimately, I want to rip out the virtual environment. I want to rip out the GitHub clone. I want to take all that stuff out because I want it all to be bundled in this Shiv Python package, which I built weeks ago and is now running. So this needs to mirror what is in the templates area, or like over here. So this thing is currently running the conductor app, and the default that it's doing is running gunicorn, which is what this flag is here. So we need to teach the Shiv app how to run Celery as well, so that we can essentially replace this portion of things, bin Celery, with just a call to the app, and hopefully we'll make it accept the worker parameter and the beat parameter. So I think what that will look like in the end is something like serve apps conductor .pyz Celery worker, because I want it to behave like that. And if we do that, I want to make it look like this so that it doesn't even need to know the app either. But we're not going to do that bit today, I think. Although we might find that deleting the extra stuff from the servers goes really quickly. So let's jump over to the next task in the milestone, which is removing npm, and see what I've got here. So we already did this. We already added tasks to pull from S3 and extract the tarball. That was done a while ago because we had to do that as part of the CI bit, so that's not needed. We need to go over here and go to the web tasks. And well, I guess now that we have finished all the collect static stuff, we can take out this thing that's just dead code. There's one bit gone. And okay. We already have those areas that are not related to JavaScript. Where did the JavaScript stuff go? Ah, here it is. So we don't need to build anymore. That's not necessary. And we also don't need to install the front-end dependencies. So cool, those two things are gone. What else can we remove? Keep going up. We've got firewalls and ports, and none of that's gonna change. Install git nginx Okay, so I think that the installation of Node itself must be coming from the Galaxy role that we're using, or yeah. So we're using, Ansible has this notion of galaxies that that are roles that you can. They're kind of like mix-ins, or they're, if you watch the Circle CI stream, they're like orbs. Like they're these pre-packaged sets of stuff that you don't have to configure all of the tasks. You just get the benefit of what comes out of it. And the node source Galaxy role does the job of installing npm for you, and we don't need that. So the tasks that we got rid of are done. There's only those 2 tasks, but we also have to get rid of Galaxy or node source. And so I know I have this in a few places, and it's got it in the make file. So we aren't going to need node source here. I don't need to install that anymore. That's one nice thing to get rid of. And where is it? Somewhere in the playbooks, is node source. I'm just gonna search for node source so that we can find it quickly. So there's 2 extra roles that are being installed here. One is this is a swap file edition. Don't worry about that one. This is the one we want to get rid of. And it exists in the web servers role. Okay. So that might be everything we needed, honestly, in order to get Node completely out of the server. It's not entirely true, because it's not like Ansible knows that we want to uninstall it. So technically my server will still have Node installed on it, but it won't be running any of that code anymore, and I can just go prune that if I really want to delete it. So let's see what that looks like now that this stuff is gone. And I think there's also going to be a little bit of paths that we can clean up, perhaps. We shall see about that, though. Yeah. All right, let's try our Vagrant provision, see how it goes. So that's removing Node by removing the node source Galaxy role. Now going through the log, you can see, I think last time the deploy ran, it was following Kamal and 7, but before Datadog, and now it just skips through that. So that's gone. Pulling the app from S3. Not sure why that's taking that long, but wonder what's going on there. I suppose it's possible that maybe Circle failed, and I wasn't paying attention to my notifications. So let's go see. No. So it looks like it was totally done. So those files should be there. Oh, there it goes. It's just taking a while to download that thing. I don't know why. Cool. So we removed node source Galaxy. We removed the npm tasks. And deployment got a lot simpler. It doesn't seem like it got a lot simpler, but just knowing that there's now no JavaScript that needs to run when doing deploy. That's and JavaScript has risks that come along with it, and is like, and frankly, when I've gone through deploys, the most likely area where deploys have failed in the past has been at the step of installing a new JavaScript, because JavaScript moves so fast that Node was the most likely thing to break. They'd change the version numbers and it wasn't super stable. So every once in a while, like probably every 3 months or so, it would just randomly break and I'd have to go in there and fix it. So now that that is pushed to CI and totally like locked down and pinned there, I don't really have to worry about that in the same way. So there was another bit in here that I want to look at before we commit this change, and that was this variable front-end path. I don't know if anything is still using that, and if not, I want to delete it. So this is where it's defined here, and it says that the client root is using it. So what is client root? Client root. Okay, this is still needed for other purposes, for managing TLS certificates. That's what these pieces are. All right, cool. So that variable needs to stay, but the rest of it is cleaned up and can go. So remove node. Hooray. Oops. Hooray. Fixes 376. And honestly, a lot of the work that I've been doing has been for this kind of payoff of removing node. Eventually, when we can remove the clone, that will be the other satisfying portion of this. Removing the virtual environment, that'll be a big part too. So let's see what's next to get there. All right, cool. We're down to maybe we can do the migration stuff right now. So we're still using the clone to run the manage command in a couple spots. And we need to switch that out to use the Shiv app to run its internally baked in manage py file. So let's look for migrate. And here you can see it's using the Django manage task. But you can see it wasn't too much effort to change this to use manage in a different way, which is what I did here, because I actually between streams I found out that like I had broken my production site because I no longer had a sitemap because the template was not generated. Anyway, it's a big to-do, but I went ahead and like figured out the stuff of running management commands. So now we just have to go through them, and anywhere that uses Django manage, we just have to replace it, which I guess is here. I'm not even sure I need this one anymore. It's for seeding the database if I started at a new one. Yeah, maybe we should do that one too. So to replace this thing, it's pretty much delete the Django manage line and replace it with a shell command that does serve apps conductor pyz, because that's now like the hub of what I can execute on here. And I say manage, and it'll be the migrate command. So that's cool. And before I, let's think on that for a minute. Manage, migrate. Okay, this is probably important for this command. Otherwise, Ansible will just hang, which we don't want. So there are times where, like, if you delete a table, the migrate command will prompt you, and it will say, do you want to delete? What is it? There's some little bit of content type metadata that's in a table somewhere, and you can either keep it around or delete it. And it will ask you that as a yes/no question. And by saying no input, I believe it defaults to keeping it, is usually what happens. So we can delete that. And there's one spot down. So this is my other custom command, although oops, we're going to need this too. We're going to change directory. Is that true? I'm not sure that this piece is true. I don't know that we need to change into this directory because we're running it from a full path. So let's see if we can simplify this and get away with doing that. Because it's running a command, it's giving a full path to the output, so that should be fine. And we can come over here and do exactly the same thing. Shell command, and it's going to be serve apps conductor pyz, and we'll say manage. And the name of the command this was a custom command that I created, was seed. That won't normally run during deployment. It's like an extra command that the idea behind this, as you might be able to read from the name, was I needed my virtual machine to have a bootstrap set of data. And so if I have a makefile target that will run this particular playbook with just this command to populate some initial data. So I believe that gets rid of all usage of the Django, the clones version of manage.py, and now everything is relying on the Shiv app. So let's try another deploy. Let's check the diff. So that looks good. The migrate looks good. The cleanup looks good, and that's not going to run, but it looks fine. I just learned about dictionaries, and this looks insane. Well, yeah, if you're brand new to Python, we're definitely looking a little bit more intermediate. Although, I run a Python meetup in my town. I live in Frederick, Maryland, and I run the local Python meetup, and we sometimes have some advanced topics. And what I tell beginners who come there is, like, it's a good chance to get exposure to some of the stuff, and you may not understand like all the bits that are going on, but you sort of learn over time and learn phrases. But if you have questions, Metallopod, please let me know. I will try my best to answer them, although if it's something that is a little bit out of scope, I'll just say, maybe I'll give you some pointers of where you could look. But yeah, doing a full app on the web can be an involved process. And I'm kind of doing some of this on hard mode by doing deployments myself. I've got an article that I'm planning to release in the next month, all about Shiv apps and what I've learned from these streams of last month. And one of the lessons will be like, hey, if you're new to making apps and you just want to get an app on the internet, go use something like Heroku, which will do a lot of this stuff for you. So you just worry about writing your Django code, and like you don't have to care about most of what I'm doing, which is it's a really nice option. Okay, so let's look through what we've got here. Coming back up, our migrate database command continued, or it worked. our sitemap XML command kept working, even though we removed that change directory thing. So I think that solves this one, which was all about removing the git clone usage. So let's commit another one. Let's keep knocking them out. And the commit for this will say switch from manage.py in the clone to the Shiv app. And this fixes 387. We can just keep going. So what's next? I feel this is good. I feel like we're knocking stuff down. I think we're starting to get some of the trickier ones though that are going to require like the actual removal of the virtual environment, the removal of the git clone will be about as easy as it was to remove the node stuff. It's purely deleting some lines from an Ansible playbook. So it's more about cleaning up the stuff around it to make sure that that still works. And I know for a fact that that's not going to happen right now because we're dependent on the virtual environment. Cool. Glad you found some use of my website. I've got a newsletter too, if you want to sign up, and that way you can find out when I submit new articles and you can glean what you want out of those. Okay, so how are we going to figure out this virtual environment stuff? I showed that the Celery area is dependent on this VN path, and maybe that's the thing that we should search for to see what all is being used or what all is using the virtual environment. And this will probably inform if there are other places that I forgot about. There are. Okay, super. Well, junk. We're not going to get to all these tonight, but now we know that this stuff is in here and we've got to figure out what to do with it. And our Shiv app is growing in complexity, which is good and bad. Mostly bad. All right, let's talk through what these things are that I see. We've got the one that I expected, the Celery worker and Celery beat. So Celery is a background task tool. So when you do a request to a website and you want that request to be as fast as possible. So let's say like normally, someone signing up for your site and you might want to send them a welcome email. Well, email can be really slow to make the connection and send it out. So what you want to do is you want the request to be fast and like log them in as soon as possible, but you still want to send the email. So you might use a tool like Celery that creates what is referred to as a task, and the task will go onto a queue, and there will be other processes, worker processes, which is what Celery worker is. And these workers are going to be watching the queue and they're looking for new stuff. And anytime it sees the new stuff, it says, oh, okay, I can handle that. And since it's working in the background, it doesn't affect your end user's experience. So even if it takes a little bit, like 5-10 seconds, whatever it is, to send the email, your user logs in for the first time, gets the really smooth, fast experience to see your shiny website, whatever it does, and the email still gets sent to them on a different timetable. So that's what Celery is for. So there's two different kinds of usage of Celery here. One, as I said, is the worker that does the most of the work, and there's this other one called beat, and the beat, Celery beat here is like you can think of it like beat of a drum. It's all about scheduled stuff that needs to happen at certain times. So I have certain tasks that on Sunday mornings when no one is around, they go off and do some more of the heavy lifting kind of work, scanning sites and doing other things that my project does. So that's what Celery is for. So that's the stuff we'll be able to hopefully be able to replace. We're going to have to read some documentation to see how to invoke it from a module. But assuming we can do that, which I think we can, we'll be able to replace this with what I showed earlier of using the Shiv app. Okay. The other one is Wally. And you can see from the task name what Wally is for. It's for backing up the database data. So I don't use a managed database, which means that, and the reason for that is it's a bit more expensive, and this is very much a side project. So the database that I have runs on the DigitalOcean droplet. But the ramification of that decision is that if I want my data to remain safe, I need to do my own backups. And so I use this tool called Wall-E. And we don't need to go into all of the details of Postgres tonight, but you can just understand that Wall-E is the tool that does backups. And it is a tool written in Python, which is why it's available on the VN path. And so we might need to also extend the Shiv app to run Wall-E. Yeah, it's getting a little hairy, but it's okay. We will continue to try and make it work. So both of these strategies rely on finding the main executable that each of these respective tools uses in order to call them and bake them into our own app. That probably sounded like gobbledygook. So let's make this clear, or clearer anyway. So I defined this main file. And this main file gets used by Shiv, which is the packaging tool. And it's reading arguments from the command line and deciding how to run the Shiv app. And both this line right here, execute from command line, and whiskyapp.run are meant to pass off the code to other parts of pass off control to other things. In the case of execute from command line, it's pass off to control to Django. In the case of whiskyapp, it's pass off the control to gunicorn, the actual web server. So where we're going to need to go is this little main is going to need to get even smarter and figure out which thing to call. So that's going to be Celery is the next one. So let's bring up the Celery docs, and how can we run Celery? What am I looking for? Run Celery module, maybe. I'm sure there are ways that you can call. There we go. Maybe this is it, answering our question. Okay. So it's going to take a little bit of trickery, perhaps. But this appears doable. But this is an old answer. That's the problem. So, yeah, documentation. Necessary part of doing work. Okay, this is cool. Worker main. looks like what we want. So where is this thing coming from? What class is this referring to? Sorry for the fast scroll. I'm trying to get to the thing that we care about. Celery application. All right. This is okay. What else? So I have a Celery app already. Yeah, take care, Metallivad. So here's the app that we want. And perhaps what needs to happen is we import Celery, import the app into the main file. Ooh. Import the app into the main file and then run it. But before I do that, I think I want to clean up what's already here, because this is going to be, I don't want main to get so gnarly by adding all these extra commands in there. So let's think through this. The way that I have this running right now is with a Boolean, and it's making it a choice between running Django manage or running running gunicorn. Sorry. I'm trying to think if there's other approaches. Like, can we run Celery from manage.py? If so, maybe we can get away with not adding a new command for this, but just passing it off to the manage command. So let's see what options, let's see if there's any commands that might surprise me in manage.py. So no, at least not at first. Let's do a search for this, because this will save us some extra code that we don't need if we can get it going. So run Celery from manage.py. That's what I'm searching for. Okay, so there was a project a while ago, and I was aware of this project, but I didn't know if it did anything else, called DJ Celery, but it might be deprecated. So basically, they might recommend not doing what I'm trying to do. But maybe it's still around, I don't know. It's still... Okay, what subversions does it support? I want to make sure it might be old, and I want to be wary of downloading packages just for a little bit of code benefit. I don't think it's going to be a ton of code to run this in our Shiv app, so I don't want to like bite off a whole other package just to get a tiny bit of extra stuff. Yeah, like this is what I was going for, is like, can we run manage like this and just call Celery worker? But again, I'm not sure, I'm not convinced yet that that's a great idea. Let's look at the GitHub page to see if it's still actively developed or not. Yeah, they even say right here, it's the old Celery integration project for Django. Ooh, no, okay. They want a sponsor for supporting these versions of Django. So this is not a path I want to walk down. So we'll do this hopefully in a different way. All right, so coming back to main, we are going to want to import app and Yeah, all of this seems reasonable. We're going to import app and start the worker main thing that we saw in the Celery documentation, which was down here somewhere. Worker main. And we'll see how we can actually test this out and see how well this is going to run by building a local Shiv app, trying it out, and seeing if it respects all the arguments that we want to. So this is actually not too horrible. So what I want to do is break this up into a bunch of pieces, and I may. Right now it's like basically it's assuming you're either running as gunicorn or running manage by checking this first argument. So I might want to make it so that you always have to specify one. Is that what I want to do? I don't know. Well, so let's at least do the refactoring to some of these smaller steps. So we'll call each of these run plus the thing that they're going to run. So run manage. And I don't know what that's going to take as arguments yet, so I'll just leave those. And we want to call it here. I think I want to give it sysargv. And sysargv is the arguments that came from the command line. And so I want to do this like so. And we'll just say, now that it's in here, we can just call it argv as an argument list. And so that should be it. Okay, so that's the manage side of this. And the other thing that we want to do is refactor this to do run gunicorn, which is also going to take argv and we'll take all of those. And so it's going to do a little bit more, but nothing different from before. So I think I can delete sys there and replace it with run gunicorn sysargv. And this isn't the final thing that way I want this to look. I'm starting to see a pattern come out of this, which I'll get to into more of a dispatch mode of running, where gunicorn will be like the fallback, and anything where the first argument matches a particular subcommand that we have defined will hand off to one of these run commands, if that makes sense. So let's at least test this much though, because testing main is doable, but I don't really want to spend a lot of effort into doing that because it's a bunch of mocking, which has limited benefit. So we're going to try and build our Shiv app here. So the package script is what we need to do. And come in here, comment out this guy. I need to fix that. So it assumes that it's going to run from CI, and it makes that assumption badly. I should check if venv is already a variable that exists, and if so, don't do anything. Otherwise use that. But this technique works for now. So we're going to. There's no pyz file here right now, and it's going to need a circle SHA-1 in order to even work, but the value doesn't matter. So we're going to say ABC, and then we're going to run package. And so this should produce a shiv for us locally, a shiv app that we can try out. And this doesn't take too long to get going. So all we've done so far, we haven't changed any of the selection logic. We've just refactored to these two functions, and I want to observe that the behavior is still the same after that refactoring. So now we have conductor ABC there, and I want to try running it like so. See if it starts up with unicorn. And it did. That's good. Okay. And the other thing I want to do is try running it with the manage stuff. So manage was the keyword. I'll try it with -h. It had no problem doing that either. Cool. So that refactor was successful. Let's give these some doc strings. Run Django's manage command. Run the web server. Okay. Now it's time for a bit of logic change. So I want what do I want? We need a dictionary, and I'll call this just call this commands, and it's going to be manage, and we're going to take run manage as the argument. So up here, we're going to say command is, or this is a run, the run function is none right now. Okay. And we are only going to try and populate the run function if there's an argument here. And so we're going to look at, we're going to call commands, it's a dictionary, with the argument, the first argument. So we're going to say run func is equal to commands get sys arg v1. Okay. And so what that does is now it's not about running manage, it's running if there's any function that we've defined, it's going to run that. So this part goes away like that. And in fact, we don't even, yeah, we do still need this check because it still may be none, in which case we want it to try and run gunicorn. So instead of this, we're going to say run func instead of run manage. And that should give us the dynamic. That's this is called dynamic dispatch, is the pattern that we're using. We're taking a dictionary. We are using the key to look up a function. And since in Python functions are first-class objects, you can store it as a value. That's totally cool. And so when it calls it, duck typing comes into effect, and the function, so this will work as long as the function accepts a single argument, which is what our manage command does. So we've got run func here, and in the future, when we get Celery going, what this will look like, in fact, let's just put it in now. That's not going to hurt, even though it's not going to do anything. We can say Celery, run Celery, like that, and that doesn't compile, shouldn't compile yet because we haven't actually defined Celery. So it's going to take an argv and say run Celery. And it's not going to do anything right now, but let's have it print out running. And in fact, we can use an F string. Why not? We'll say running argv. Like this, or running Celery with argv. Okay, I don't know what happened to black there. Why did you not work, black? Okay. So now we have multiple commands available, and we can run our package command again. So it should be removing the old one. If I did that part right, I can't remember if I had it clean that up or not. And it will replace it with a new version after it pulls all these pieces together. And once it's finished with that, we'll be able to try it out. Okay. So we still have conductor ABC, and it did not like that. Invalid syntax. You had a syntax error, that's why. There we go. Okay, that explains why black wasn't running, but it wasn't complaining about the syntax error. I don't know what was going on with Vim there. Okay, anyway, we'll we will repackage this, hopefully without the syntax error this time, and try it again and see what happens. Almost done. Okay, conductor ABC, manage. This should dump out manage help if it's still working correctly. which it does. Cool. And then we should also have Celery now available and with a worker. Oops, sorry. I'm so used to typing manage that I totally use the actual manage command. Okay, there is our exactly what we would expect. It printed out stuff with the entire argv list. And we should also check that Unicorn still doing its thing. And it is. Great. So I think I want to stop there because I don't want, it's going to take a while to, I'm sure, shake out any bugs that come along with calling it in this way using worker main, because we're going to have to, yeah, there's more stuff that I can see that we need to do. So we need to put in notes for ourselves in the future. Use worker main. That will be our hint to how to start next time. So to recap what we did tonight, we did a bunch of things, I guess. We fixed the permissions of static files. So that was kind of a prerequisite before we could start tearing out other stuff. Then we took out Node from the deployment process. We ripped out the Galaxy role there, and so that sped up deployment by a fair amount. And we looked at the next pieces that were in line. And in order to get to taking out the virtual environment and the git clone, we have to start and make sure that all of the management commands are done, and we move them over to running for those from the Shiv app. And then we also need to fix this up so that the Shiv app will run Celery. And so that's another piece of the puzzle. So we are working on Celery, and then after that, we also have to do Wally as the backup. So with a bit of refactoring, we've made main now simpler. So it is a dynamic dispatch system on commands. It will run Unicorn if it's a command that it doesn't recognize. Otherwise, it will run specific commands. And I think that's where we can stop and pick up here next time to try and run the actual worker based on the output from argv, if that's the right thing to do. Yeah, so I will make sure to get this recording up online after this stream is over, so that you can refer back to anything that you found useful on there, if you need to go back and rewatch some piece that you might have missed along the way. If you thought this was useful, give me a follow on Twitch so you can stay up to date with future streams, or give me a like if you're catching this on YouTube. I'd appreciate that. I also am very open to feedback and would be happy to receive it on Twitter, where I am MB Layman there. I'm usually MB Layman on the internet. That's what I try and go by. It seems to be a unique handle that works for me. One place that I'm also available at is Patreon. So if you have found this really useful and want to support me on Patreon, throw a few dollars my way, I would be really grateful for that as well. So that's going to call it a night for me, and I hope you learned something, and I will catch you next time. Take care.